Hello there, my global explorer. What city and country are you watching from? Somewhere famous or totally off the grid? Let me know in the comments below. And if this video tickles your brain just right, share it around. It really helps. Let's begin. Melissa, my wife, clocked just over 8,000 miles on the road each year, most of them short hops to and from her clients' offices. Our detached home in Surrey sat within a short drive of the infamous M25, that colossal motorway encircling London like an unbroken chain of gridlock. It was undeniably a lovely area to live in, yet even the briefest trip could turn nightmarish the moment you joined that endless, crawling loop of traffic. To endure those maddening journeys, Melissa had developed her own little coping mechanisms. She stocked the car with snacks and fizzy drinks, and always tuned into bubblegum pop stations to keep her spirits buoyant. Her greatest source of delight, however, was her car itself, a vibrant orange VW Beetle cabriolet she adored beyond reason. This wasn't some battered relic of the past. It was Volkswagen's modern reboot, a 2-liter engine with real bite, a premium sound system, a sleek black convertible roof, and matching leather seats. Most people couldn't help but smile at the sight of it. That didn't stop Melissa from gradually filling the interior with sweet wrappers, coffee cups, and stray odds and ends. I often chuckled at the irony. Here was a car capable of flying past 120 miles per hour, yet most of its existence was spent shuffling along Britain's busiest roads at a snail's pace. Her obsession with Beetles stretched back to her university days, when she'd owned an older model. She reminisced about it often, though those stories belonged to a time before we met, back when she still lived with her parents. I never pressed for details, but I wouldn't have been shocked if those fond memories included squeezing in with a car full of friends and late-night adventures. Years later, when Volkswagen announced the Beetle's comeback, Melissa couldn't stop talking about how much she wanted one. I took the hint. For her 50th birthday, I surprised her with a fully loaded convertible version, and splurged on a personalized plate she'd been eyeing for ages. The plate featured her initials and the word bug, and while the price had been outrageous, the grin it put on her face made it worth every penny. From that day on, we affectionately dubbed it the Wally dog. For all her devotion to the car, Melissa never concerned herself with mundane things like tire pressure or oil levels. Those were quietly my responsibility. I also couldn't stand the state of the interior, perpetually littered with half-empty cups and snack debris, so I cleaned it regularly without mentioning it. She probably never noticed, let alone thanked me, but I didn't mind. I often found enough loose change in the process to buy myself a pint or two down at the pub. Her casual disregard for spare coins wasn't surprising. We were both doing well financially and enjoyed a fairly comfortable lifestyle. Melissa worked as a business consultant, advising companies on how to grow and evolve. I freelanced as a project manager, specializing in organizational change. Everyone knew me as Dan, though my actual name is Daniel, not short for Terrence, just Daniel. Even Melissa calls me Dan. The nickname stuck from my corporate days, the Terminator. Change management, more often than not, leads to redundancies, and I was frequently the one sent in to deliver the hard news and oversee the aftermath. Melissa and I met while studying business administration at university. We became inseparable, and even before tying the knot, we co-founded our own firm, Alpha Business Consultants Limited, ABC for short. We were inexperienced but determined, and we had the invaluable support of my father, a seasoned corporate lawyer. Dad agreed to come on board as a director, investing both his expertise and some early funding. That backing gave us immediate credibility with potential clients. In return, we offered him a stake in the company. He remained our trusted advisor for years, until illness claimed him a couple of years ago. In ABC's early days, Melissa and I hustled relentlessly, carving out a niche in strategic business advice. Over time, though, it became clear our strengths lay in different realms. Melissa thrived at long-range planning, helping companies imagine the future and chart their course. I, meanwhile, excelled in the trenches, parachuting in to fix problems when plans fell apart. Both Melissa and my father felt ABC should stick strictly to strategy, not execution. We eventually agreed. Melissa would continue running ABC, while I struck out solo, specializing in managing change on a contract basis. She kept the firm thriving, while I moved from project to project, often embedded within client organizations for months at a time. When our twin daughters, Laura and Lily, were little, I converted an upstairs room in our house into ABC's office, complete with a hand-painted sign simply reading "Office." Though intended for both of us, it gradually became Melissa's exclusive space, as she worked mostly from home, while I spent my days on client sites. These days, Melissa handles around 50 core clients, billing them as needed for her strategic guidance. My assignments usually come through referrals or subcontracting for bigger consultancies, but I only ever take one client at a time, usually overseeing major transitions like relocations or corporate restructurings. When a project ends, I always allow myself a breather, a few days, sometimes even a few weeks, before plunging back into the next challenge. Most people feel uneasy when they don't know what's coming next. I used to be the same, but somewhere along the way, I got used to the unpredictability, and eventually, I even grew to like it. The pauses life threw at me, those stretches of unexpected quiet, gave me the freedom to dive into books I'd been meaning to read, experiment in the kitchen, and finally perfect a few recipes that had lingered on my to-do list for years. Those breaks also let me take care of the house myself, at least the tasks I could manage without calling a plumber or an electrician. One job I handled often was scrubbing the aquarium in Melissa's study. She'd once read an article claiming that tropical fish swimming in a big tank could improve focus and boost creativity, and, naturally, she had to try it. Melissa loved watching the fish glide around in the glowing water, but she had no interest in maintaining the thing. I doubt she could have told you what pH stood for. As far as she was concerned, it was just alphabet soup. So I ended up being the caretaker, feeding the fish, cleaning the filter, and making sure none of them floated belly up. I never minded staying home when Melissa went away for her frequent short business trips, and she didn't complain when my work sent me out to isolated facilities for a week or so. Honestly, I think those brief separations did us good, gave us room to miss each other, to reset. When our daughters left home and the house turned quiet, I imagined that quiet might be an opportunity for us to reconnect. I pictured dinners out, maybe even sneaking off for a long weekend in Paris or Rome. But you know the saying, we make plans and the universe laughs. Everything changed the day Melissa walked through the door with Wee Doug. Wee Doug is a Shih Tzu, one of those little dogs nicknamed lion dogs in China. Every time I look at him, I'm reminded of that old joke about a man who goes to the zoo and finds only one exhibit, a dog. A Shih Tzu, of course. I was irritated at first. Melissa hadn't even asked me if I wanted a dog. Wee Doug was friendly enough, but I knew exactly who would be the one walking him, feeding him, and looking after him whenever Melissa was busy or traveling. At that time, he was still a puppy and nowhere near house-trained. Guess who got stuck handling that messy stage? His name, Wally Dog, wasn't just a nod to his size. For a while, he relieved himself absolutely everywhere. Melissa didn't care. She doted on him from day one. He became her shadow, curled up on her lap whenever she sat down, stretched out beside her on the couch while she watched TV, sitting in the dining chair next to her during meals. Every morning I'd find him sprawled across our bed. I tried persuading Melissa to set some limits, but she wouldn't hear of it. To salvage what little intimacy we had left, I started locking our bedroom door when I wanted time alone with her. Even then, I had to remember to unlock it afterward. Otherwise, Wee Doug would sit in the hallway whining until Melissa's attention shifted from me to him. By now you might picture me as a cranky old man obsessing over petty irritations, maybe even rooting through my wife's car for stray bits of trash. But I'm not that guy. Small messes don't bother me. When I cleaned the car, I just gathered everything up, stuffed it into a plastic bag hanging on the doorframe, and tossed it all without sorting, because it was always junk anyway. That Sunday started the same way. I was clearing Melissa's car, filling the bag with empty wrappers and receipts, when a slip of paper fluttered to the ground. It was a credit card receipt from the Ainsley House Hotel, a grand old estate about 20 miles out of town. The place is well known for its fine dining, though most of its revenue comes from conferences, weddings, and spa retreats rather than casual meals. The receipt didn't say what had been purchased, only the total, enough for a meal for 2, maybe 3. Assuming Melissa had been entertaining clients, I set it aside for her expense report and slid it into my wallet. I finished cleaning out the car, then drove wee Doug to the garage for a fill-up and a quick check of the tires and fluids. Melissa was leaving on a business trip the next morning and wouldn't be back for several days. That left me with time on my hands. I had hoped to take her out for lunch at the Fox and Hounds pub, but she brushed me off, too busy packing and preparing for the trip. It stung. Sundays had always been our family day, a tradition even after the girls moved out. They still called home every Sunday without fail. When I returned from the garage, I found Melissa stretched out in the living room, feet propped up, deep in conversation on the phone. No surprise there. It was Lily on the other end. From Melissa's tone, it was clear Lily was going through yet another personal crisis. That was typical of her. Lily was always the dramatic one. Laura, our other daughter, was the calm and steady opposite. When the girls' casual overnight stays with the boys began shifting into something more serious, I did my best to stay calm about it. I wanted them to feel supported and understood without making them feel like I was hovering over every decision they made. They've always known our door is open whenever they need guidance or reassurance. Still, when it comes to secrets or drama, their mother is usually the one they turn to first. I remember Melissa telling Lily not to dwell on things, encouraging her to jump back into the dating pool and reminding her there were plenty of options out there. I didn't know exactly what had happened between Lily and the boy in question, nor could I say what advice I might have offered if she had asked me. Personally, I've always tried to live by the old Latin saying festina lente, hurry slowly, think things through before making big decisions. Whatever Lily was wrestling with, it seemed like something she needed to navigate on her own. I didn't want to add my own confusion to the mix by giving her half-baked advice. So instead, I just asked Melissa to tell Lily I'd said hello and wandered into the kitchen to get started on our usual Sunday lunch. Sundays were sacred in our house. Roast beef, Yorkshire puddings, and crispy potatoes had become something of a weekly ritual. Cooking, for me, has always been a form of therapy. There's a comfort in the rhythm of it, especially when there's a good bottle of claret breathing on the counter. Melissa's never been one for long table conversations, but over meals she would casually fill me in on the latest updates she'd gotten from Laura and Lily. Laura was doing well. She'd started seeing a nice guy, was thriving in her studies, and was pulling in top marks on her assignments. Lily, however, was struggling. Her boyfriend had broken up with her after catching her kissing someone else. I mentioned that maybe, given time, the boyfriend might come around and forgive her. But I also pointed out that if Lily kept trying out other options, going back probably wouldn't be possible. Melissa strongly disagreed. She felt Lily should leave the past behind and go have some fun instead of clinging to a failed relationship. After we finished dinner, I clipped Wee Doug's leash on and took him out for his nightly walk, carefully tying up his mess in one of those black plastic bags and dropping it in the nearest bin. I've never understood people who leave those bags hanging from tree branches. Do they honestly think some mythical poop fairy is going to swoop in at night and deal with it? Later that evening, I slumped in front of the TV while Melissa holed up in her office with Wee Doug at her feet, working on a presentation for one of her clients. When she finally wrapped up, I loaded the dishwasher, shut off the lights, and headed upstairs. Sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned for a good while before finally drifting off. I vaguely remember Melissa sliding into bed sometime later, but by the time morning rolled around, she was already up and gone. Instead of her face, the first thing I woke up to was Wee Doug's foul little Shih Tzu breath right in my own. Nothing motivates you to get out of bed faster than that. I threw on some clothes, took him for his morning walk, and joined Melissa in the kitchen afterward. Neither of us are what you'd call morning people. She needs at least 2 espressos before she resembles anything close to human. We exchanged a few words about the weather while waiting for the stop-and-go traffic on the M25 to clear up. Then she kissed my cheek, scratched Wee Doug behind the ears, and headed out the door to her car. It wasn't until after she'd left that I remembered the hotel receipt tucked away in my wallet. I figured I'd leave it on her office desk for her to see later. That's when I noticed the timestamp, 10 a.m. It looked like a charge for an overnight stay, which didn't add up. Maybe she'd had a late work function and decided not to drive back. I could have just waited to ask her about it later. I was sure she'd have some reasonable explanation. But curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled out my day planner to double-check our schedules. I wasn't home that week. According to my notes, Melissa was supposed to be headed north for a 3-night business trip. The receipt, however, was dated the morning after she left, suggesting she'd only made it about 20 miles before checking into the Ainsley House Hotel. If it had truly been for work, I could have dropped her off myself. There would have been no reason to pay for a hotel so close to home. I stared at that slip of paper, replaying everything in my head. Nothing in her recent behavior had felt suspicious. Our love life was still very much alive. And yet, I couldn't ignore the nagging thought. Was this evidence of something else? Was Melissa seeing someone behind my back? The idea hit me like a brick. I had no suspects, no warning signs, no clue why she would choose a hotel over simply using our own house when I was gone. Unless she was doing both. Or maybe there was an explanation I hadn't even considered. The thought gnawed at me. Could she be repeating the same thing on this current business trip? I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the receipt, silently praying I was overthinking everything. A cheerful receptionist picked up. I asked if I could be connected to a guest, Mrs. Amanda Carter. She apologized and explained that Mrs. Carter hadn't checked in yet. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief, until she added that check-in wouldn't begin until noon. It was only 11:30. "Would you like to leave a message?" she asked politely. "Oh, I could have left one all right. Something along the lines of, 'Your husband called. He wants to know what on earth you're doing there.' Tempting, sure, but that wouldn't give me the answers I needed." I declined and hung up. I poured myself another cup of coffee and tried to figure out my next move. Unlike the clowns running the government, I wasn't going to stall, dodge, or feed myself comforting lies. Confronting her at the hotel might not solve everything, but at least it would be doing something. Maybe there was an innocent explanation, or maybe she was cheating, and I was the last to find out. Either way, I decided it was time to face the truth head-on. I left Wally Dog out in the yard, figuring I'd deal with cleaning up after him once I got back, then jumped into the car and set off toward the Ainsley House Hotel. By the time I pulled into the lot, the clock had already crept past noon. The first thing I saw was Wally Dog nosing around the parking area, which could only mean Melissa had already arrived and checked in. I couldn't be bothered about parking neatly. I sprawled the car across 4 rows, grabbed my phone, and dialed her number. She picked up right away. "Hey Dan, everything okay? I heard there was a nasty crash on the freeway and wanted to make sure you weren't caught in it." "I'm fine," I told her. "Traffic's crawling, but I hadn't heard about any accident." "It's on the M25. Maybe you made it through before things got blocked." "Could be. I'm just past Watford now. Thanks for checking." "All right, let me know once you've arrived." "Will do. Bye." The exchange was pointless, but it gave me an idea. Instead of heading straight to her room, I'd scout the hotel first. If she was having lunch with some guy, chances were they'd leave together afterward. If I didn't spot her anywhere public, I could always call her room and pretend I was dropping by to talk. Inside, I headed straight for the Brasserie, the hotel's restaurant. It was nearly empty, and Melissa wasn't there. The lobby bar looked like a better place to sit unnoticed, somewhere I could watch quietly to see if she turned up with anyone. Even then, part of me wondered, maybe I was wrong, maybe she was here for something innocent. But I doubted it. Crossing the lobby, a notice board caught my eye. It listed daily events and private bookings. Mondays looked mostly dead, except for one peculiar listing: a private function booked in the spa and fitness center at 7 p.m. I couldn't help picturing what kind of party required privacy in a spa, probably one where clothing was optional. Curious, I asked the receptionist about it. She stiffened and politely said she wasn't allowed to share any details. In other words, none of my business. I took the hint and sat down at the bar instead, ordering a coffee. The waiter who served it was far less guarded. When I casually joked about the nudists at the spa, he grinned and spilled more than I expected. Nudists, yeah, you could call them that, he said. But it's more than that. Honestly, it's an open secret around here. These private parties happen all the time. Sounds intriguing, I said, pretending interest. Any idea how someone could find out more? Easy, he replied. Just look them up online. The club's name is... He even spelled it for me. I sipped my coffee, pulled out my phone, and jumped onto the hotel's Wi-Fi. A quick search brought up the club's website. Joining was straightforward. Pay a $20 annual fee, agree to their terms, and you were in. One event in particular stood out. Mellow Monday Mix and Pick Party, scheduled for that very evening at 7 p.m. in the spa. Entry for single men, $49, masks optional. At that point, I was convinced this was the real reason Melissa had booked herself into the hotel. She wasn't here for work. She was here for an adventure. I didn't plan on witnessing anything indecent, but I needed proof, something undeniable I could use when the divorce proceedings started. Of course, I couldn't risk her spotting me lingering around the lobby all day. So I drained my coffee and headed back to the car. From there, I called the club directly. A cheerful woman processed my payment and told me I'd need to bring ID to enter the event. She promised that my details would remain confidential, even other members wouldn't see them, and that charges on my bank statement would appear simply as SJB Services. Satisfied, I drove home to check on Wally Dog and dig deeper. I wasn't entirely sure I was right until I logged into our joint bank account. There it was, recurring charges to SJB Services, going back months. Jackpot. I printed out the statements and drove back to the hotel. By the time evening rolled around, I waited until just after 8, then headed for the spa. At the reception desk of the spa, a woman sat behind a long oak table. Her floral dress was vibrant, yet her demeanor balanced warmth with quiet professionalism. The moment she spoke, I recognized her voice. She was the same person who'd answered my call earlier that day. After a quick glance at my identification, she passed me the mask I had prepaid for and gave a brief, reassuring smile, as though she could sense the nervous tension I carried. "You'll be fine," she murmured in a tone that was both soothing and encouraging. "Go straight to the gym area. You're running a little late, so you might have to wait to slip in, but don't worry. Everyone here is welcoming. If you're unsure about anything, just ask. Someone will help you find your way." Mask in hand, I stepped past the doorway and followed a narrow corridor. The muted hum of distant chatter and soft music grew louder as I passed the changing rooms, leading me toward the gym. Inside, roughly 70 or 80 people were spread throughout the large open space. It was obvious the organizers had put thought into making the environment inviting. The air was comfortably warm. Lighting was soft and subdued. A faint strain of jazz floated from overhead speakers, not intrusive, just enough to create an easy rhythm in the background. Near the entrance, a table offered refreshments, though most of the crowd had gravitated toward the adjoining rooms deeper inside. That's where I saw her, my wife. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Too many people were around. Any outburst would have drawn attention. Instead, I kept my silence, pretending to be just another quiet observer. My phone, half hidden in the sleeve of my jacket, recorded everything. I had signed a confidentiality waiver at the entrance, but that was irrelevant. Proof mattered more than rules now. Melissa's face would be unmistakable in the footage. Later, I could blur everyone else if I needed to. A man stood near me, mid-40s, pale skin, black slacks, black shirt. He gestured animatedly, commenting on what was happening before us. I couldn't tell if he was speaking to me, himself, or some unseen companion. Part of my mind screamed in panic, but I shoved that chaos into a locked mental drawer. The rest of me was cold, deliberate, focused only on documenting what I was seeing. When I left, The receptionist lifted an eyebrow, clearly surprised at my early departure. I muttered something about forgetting an item and promised I'd return. Inside, though, I was collapsing. To call me upset was meaningless. My reality had been split wide open. Melissa wasn't just with someone else. She was with strangers. Everything I thought we had, everything I thought was sacred, suddenly felt cheap, counterfeit. By the time I stepped outside the hotel, the physical shock hit me. My stomach turned violently. Bile burned the back of my throat, bitter and acidic, as though I'd swallowed poison. A hollow ache spread through me, paired with a grief so heavy it felt like gravity itself was dragging me down. I stumbled to my car and sat there, paralyzed. Minutes or longer passed before I could even think about starting the engine. Eventually, something inside me shifted. A wall went up, not comfort, but containment. An emotional quarantine sealed off the worst of the pain. I recognized the process. I'd studied how people cope with upheaval. Denial wouldn't help me now. What I had seen couldn't be unseen. Melissa had made her choice. I was furious, yes, but rage alone wouldn't solve anything. I needed to act, to guide this chaos rather than let it devour me. Questions of why were pointless. Acceptance was the only path to control. By the time I reached home, a plan had already begun to take shape. I'd give it the night, sit with the feelings, see how they settled in the morning, then move forward with precision and intent. For now, I leashed Weedug, took him outside for a quick walk, and tried numbing the raw edges of my pain with 2 stiff pours of Glenfarclas. Sleep never came. Morning brought fatigue instead of clarity, but still I couldn't sit still. I packed up Weedug and hit the road. Cornwall had always felt like England's rugged crown, the last wild stretch before land surrendered to the Atlantic. The peninsula thrust itself southwest into the sea, stubborn and defiant, like a clenched fist aimed at the horizon. These days, Cornwall no longer felt like a working community. It had transformed into a retreat for the retired and the wealthy, Londoners buying up old fishermen's cottages, turning them into holiday escapes. The locals had mostly been pushed out, replaced by gray-haired couples strolling along the coast with tiny dogs trotting at their feet. I'd briefly thought about taking Weedug with me abroad, to Belgium, but he didn't have a microchip or a pet passport. In the end, maybe that was a blessing. Without a chip, he couldn't be traced. And Cornwall, being farther from Surrey than Brussels, offered the perfect place to disappear. The drive to Newquay stretched over 5 hours, broken only by a single stop so Weedug could stretch and relieve himself. When we arrived, I found a local shelter and told the kind-faced woman at the desk that I'd found him wandering the streets, collarless and alone. She immediately recognized him as a Shih Tzu. Though she didn't react to my awkward joke about zoos, she reassured me he'd find a home quickly, especially with so many retirees looking for small, affectionate companions. Weedug didn't cry when I left. He just tilted his head and stared, confused but silent. Driving away from Newquay, I allowed myself one small indulgence, a country pub and a late lunch, a brief pause before whatever came next. When I asked the clerk at the gas station where I might find a decent meal nearby, his answer caught me off guard. "You can't do much better than White Horse," he said matter-of-factly. For a moment I stood stunned, certain I'd misheard him. Then it dawned on me. He wasn't being crude. He was talking about the White Horse Inn down the road. An hour later, I was tucked away in a quiet corner of the inn's beer garden, a ploughman's lunch set before me, and half a pint of chilled ale within reach. I glanced at my phone, scrolled briefly through notifications, and decided to call Jack Spencer. Jack was a senior partner at a well-established consultancy based in Surrey, someone Melissa and I had known for years. Outwardly, he exuded affability, but beneath that polished charm lived an ambition sharp enough to cut through stone. He had been one of ABC's fiercest rivals. When Melissa and I first launched ABC, Jack did everything short of sabotage to force us out of the market, even offering to buy us off with lucrative positions in his firm if we'd shut ABC down. It was clear his generosity would evaporate the second we stopped being a threat. We turned him down, Yet over the years, we continued to bump into him at Chamber of Commerce functions. To my surprise, Jack was intrigued by what I shared. Despite the short notice, he agreed to meet me the following day. By the time I made it back to Surrey, dusk had already settled. I decided to ring Melissa, planning to update her about Wee Doug. Though resentment still burned under my skin, I felt I could manage the conversation without revealing what truly fueled my anger. Before I could dial, my phone lit up, Melissa calling me instead. "Hey," I answered. "I was just about to call you." Her voice trembled. "I've got awful news." Wally Dog had slipped out of the garden earlier, bolted straight toward the main road, and been struck by a heavy lorry. "Oh God," she cried. Did he survive?" "I'm so sorry," I murmured. "He didn't." I explained I hadn't seen the accident myself. A passerby had rushed to tell me she'd seen a little dog dart through our gate and into traffic. The driver hadn't even stopped, maybe never realized what happened. There had been nothing left to do but bury Wally Doug in the yard. Melissa sobbed on the other end of the line, repeating, "My poor Wally Doug," between gasps. I didn't blame the dog for what Melissa had done. In truth, I felt an odd satisfaction knowing Wally Dog was perfectly safe down in Cornwall, while Melissa believed him dead. I offered gentle condolences, even suggested we put up a small marker for his grave. That idea sent her into fresh tears, and we ended the call. She was shattered. I knew she would cry herself hoarse that night. The next morning, I visited the local butcher, purchased a rabbit, and smashed it with a hammer. I wrapped the carcass in an old towel and buried it where Melissa believed Wally Dog lay. If she ever exhumed the body, she would find exactly what she expected: mangled remains, decomposed enough to pass for a small Shih Tzu. I even fastened Wally Dog's collar around the rabbit's neck, though I kept his ID tag for myself. For Melissa, it would become a lasting token of her imagined loss. Later that day, I met Jack Spencer. The meeting surpassed my expectations. After I outlined what I needed, Jack assured me his firm would almost certainly approve the arrangement. Their corporate lawyer would prepare an agreement for me to review as soon as possible. On the drive back, I stopped at an estate agency to inquire about the market value of our house. The number they quoted left me stunned. Melissa and I had once planned to keep the house for retirement, renting it out instead of selling. Our daughters had agreed with that plan, but everything had shifted now, and my plans would shift with it. That night, I didn't bother calling Melissa, though I suspected she waited for me to. She could shoulder her grief alone. By the next day, she would be home, likely still in tears. If she had been truthful, she was somewhere near Manchester at that very moment. But honestly, who could say with certainty that's how it had unfolded? Whatever she might have been doing, wherever she'd disappeared to, one thing I knew for sure: that night, I slept easier than I had in weeks. Striking back, however minor the gesture, dulled the bitterness she'd left festering inside me. When dawn broke, my first thought landed squarely on Wally Doug. For a moment, I was disoriented, half expecting him to be curled up nearby. Then it hit me. He was gone, permanently. Relief, strange and fleeting, washed through me. No more walking him in the rain, no more cleaning up after him. But that lightness evaporated fast, because bigger problems loomed. In England, the polite euphemism for divorce lawyers is family solicitors. Their domain? Messy human entanglements, separations, custody battles, disputed wills, bleak territory. There are countless firms, all blending into one another, faceless and interchangeable. I wanted someone outside my immediate circle, so I booked an appointment in Dorking. The name itself amused me, a dark little joke I clung to, and it wasn't far to travel. They slotted me in for the afternoon. With time to kill, I distracted myself. I scrolled through the DVLA website, browsing custom license plates I'd never actually buy. Later, I wandered into a jewelry store, then grabbed a few groceries to keep up appearances. Between errands, I made perfunctory calls to business contacts, pretending life was normal. By the time I arrived at the solicitor's office, my nerves were raw. Never in my life had I imagined sitting in a place like this. The receptionist greeted me with quiet kindness, set a coffee in front of me, and asked me to wait. The solicitor, mid-40s, calm, professional, listened as I unloaded everything. When I'd finished, she urged me not to rush, to take my time. From what I knew, lawyers rarely turned away cases, no matter how sordid, so her patience surprised me. I told her filing for divorce wasn't final. We could withdraw it if circumstances changed. Not that I believed they would. She didn't seem to care one way or another, but she agreed to proceed on the grounds of Melissa's infidelity. When I got home, something in me snapped. Without thinking, I marched straight into Melissa's office and urinated into her fish tank. I didn't bother questioning whether the tropical fish would survive. They wouldn't. Urea breaks down into ammonia and uric acid. Both are deadly to delicate gills and scales. Maybe they'd last until nightfall, maybe not. Either way, I didn't care. Hurting her dog would have been unthinkable. Ornamental fish were another matter. The strangest thing was how conflicted it felt. I'd spent months tending that tank, cleaning filters, feeding them on schedule, and now here I was poisoning them. Disgusting, yes, but in its own twisted way, gratifying. Another petty victory, another burden lifted. I pitied the fish, but Melissa? Not at all. She had far worse problems headed her way. That night, Melissa returned home, still hollow from grief, too distraught to eat. I didn't make things easier. I'd cooked beef vindaloo, one of my favorites and one of her least. Perfect. It gave me an excuse to crack open a few bottles of Scottish craft beer and enjoy the evening on my own terms. Over dinner, I casually mentioned a new contract I'd secured while she'd been gone. Told her I'd be traveling to Yorkshire for work. She assumed it was another short-term gig, like so many others I'd taken. But when I explained I'd be leaving in the morning and wouldn't return until late Saturday, she looked stricken, still mourning Wally Doug, still struggling with the idea of me disappearing again. I didn't want to seem entirely heartless, so after eating I put an arm around her as we watched television. She cried softly for the dog. I sat beside her, my skin smelling faintly of curry and beer. Later, in bed, I let out a fart so thunderous it could have rattled the windows 2 streets over. The stench clung to the air like some long-buried carcass unearthed from the soil. Melissa recoiled in disgust. I didn't mind. In fact, it suited me. By Friday morning, the fish were hanging on by a thread. I hadn't fed them in days, and my earlier stunt with the tank had taken its toll. They wouldn't last much longer. Melissa, still asleep upstairs, had no idea another heartbreak was about to unfold. Yorkshire, by contrast, was a triumph. The deal I'd been negotiating finally closed. The contract was signed, sealed, ready to roll. Several directors I knew personally celebrated the news, thrilled I'd agreed to a 6-month engagement with the potential to go permanent. The terms were generous. Relocation covered, 2 weeks in a hotel on their dime, and half the rent for whatever place I found after that. Everything slotted neatly into place. All I had left to do was free myself, emotionally and legally, from Melissa. I'd barely set my suitcase down in the hotel room when my phone rang. I'd been longing for a proper pint of Yorkshire ale, and had neither patience nor inclination to spend those precious minutes talking to Melissa on the phone. Deep down, I understood there would be repercussions for what had happened with the fish. Accidental or not, their deaths would eventually catch up with me. As things turned out, the fallout was minor. Melissa had noticed the lifeless fish drifting near the surface of the tank earlier that afternoon. When she broke the news, she tried to soften the impact, unaware she was speaking directly to the one who had caused it. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, especially after everything that's gone on with Wee Doug," she murmured. "I don't know how it happened, but there was nothing I could have done to save them." "You're probably right, Melissa," I said. "There's no point in worrying now. Just leave the tank as it is. I'll clean and disinfect it when I get back tomorrow." That Saturday, the house felt unsettlingly quiet. My visit was only brief. I'd be back on the road the following morning, heading north to Yorkshire once more. There were errands to handle, paperwork to sort, and no real energy left for small talk. Melissa threw herself into shopping and cooking, partly, I suspected, to keep her distance. We spent the evening slouched on the sofa, half watching meaningless celebrity interviews over a couple of glasses of wine. Neither of us felt like being close. We were both exhausted, in different ways, both physically and emotionally spent. Oddly enough, I slept well that night, the first proper rest I'd managed in days. By morning, the raw shock that had been clinging to me felt dulled, my thoughts steadier. The confusion, dread, and grief had eased a little, replaced by a grim determination to keep going and salvage whatever I could. The sadness was still there, an emptiness in my chest, but no longer the crushing weight it had been. I kept myself grounded by narrowing my focus, one small step at a time, nothing more. After lunch, I loaded up the car, kissed Melissa goodbye, and set off again toward Yorkshire. A few days later, the divorce papers arrived. Melissa must have been blindsided. She'd had no warning at all. I imagine she thought she was signing some routine formality. I, on the other hand, knew exactly when it would land, and chose to keep my phone switched off that day. I like to think I wasn't acting out of malice, but a part of me admits I welcomed that brief distance. That evening, back in my room, I switched the phone on and scrolled through the backlog of messages and voicemails. Her voice was sharp with confusion, frustration, and anger. I called her straight away. "What's going on, Dan?" she demanded. "What the hell is this about?" "That's the same question I've been asking myself, Melissa," I answered. "It's been a week. I still don't know what game you're playing at, but it needs to stop. This is ridiculous." "It's almost as if you're reading my own thoughts," I said quietly. "What are you talking about?" she shot back. "I mean, I've spent a long time wondering what you were up to. But it's too late now. Too late to undo any of it. And no, it wasn't some kind of joke." "What do you mean, Dan?" "The Ainsley House Hotel," I said, "and the Bottoms Up Club." Silence stretched down the line, followed by a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry," Melissa said at last, voice low. "I don't know what to say. I honestly thought you'd never find out. And I figured what you didn't know wouldn't hurt you." "Well, I do know now, and it does hurt. Dan, we need to talk about this, but not over the phone. Will you be home Friday?" "I don't know if talking will fix anything," I replied. "I'll come Saturday, but I've got to head back to Yorkshire Sunday night." When I arrived that Saturday afternoon, the worry was etched plainly on Melissa's face. I didn't bother unpacking. I had no idea how the weekend would unfold. I'd even decided to sleep in one of the guest rooms, an easy exit if things got unbearable. There's something distinctly English about how we respond to disaster, whether it's the end of a marriage or a house burning to the ground. We put the kettle on. Before long, Melissa and I were sitting in the living room with cups of tea in hand. I waited in silence for her to begin. "First things first," she said finally. "I need to be honest with you. This whole mess, it's my fault, Dan. I stayed quiet. I won't deny it. Curiosity got the better of me. My first glimpse of the Bottoms Up Club happened almost by accident, but once I knew it existed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The first time I gathered the nerve to go, you weren't even home. I was so nervous that I showed up wearing a masquerade mask, convinced that anonymity would somehow make it easier. My plan was simple: stay quiet, stay unseen, watch from the sidelines while everyone else performed. That was the deal I made with myself. I waited, letting her continue the story in her own time. "At first," she murmured, "everything unfolded exactly the way I pictured it. But things didn't stay that way. People approached me, one after another, inviting me to participate. And before I knew it, I stopped resisting. I allowed myself to get swept into it. Oddly enough," she went on, "they turned out to be some of the most honest, genuine people I've ever met. Safer than I ever imagined. That's part of what drew me back." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for reassurance. "I get it, Melissa," I said quietly. "It's not wrong to want excitement with other people," I added, forcing a faint smile. She seemed to take comfort in my words, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "As far as I'm concerned," I continued, If no promises are being broken and everyone involved is consenting, then it's your decision. I leaned back, sipping my tea slowly, watching her face. The warmth in her expression faded almost immediately. I stayed silent, observing. Melissa's reaction was exactly what I expected. She had a plan and was determined to see it through. She admitted she'd made mistakes, even took responsibility for them. But there was no remorse in her voice, no apology for the hurt caused, no intention of stopping. I knew her too well. Once Melissa set her mind on something, nothing could pry her away. "What I've shared with others," she said at last, "doesn't change what I feel for you, Dan. I love you. What we have is beautiful. I just need you to understand. Enjoying myself in a safe, controlled way doesn't threaten us. You don't have to be part of it. If you're not there, you won't see it, and it won't affect you." "You're wrong, Melissa," I replied evenly. "And besides, I can't pretend I don't already know." She blinked, startled. "Know what?" "I know about the hotel charges, the club fees," I said. "You want the truth? I saw you there." Her face froze in shock. You saw me?" I held her gaze and nodded. "If I remember right," I continued, "it was around 8 o'clock on a Monday night, a couple of weeks back. You were enjoying yourself with 2 younger men." Her breath hitched. "Oh my God," she whispered, horrified. "I'm so sorry. Seeing that must have been unbearable for you. But listen, I swear I don't love anyone else. I've never wanted anyone else. I should have told you, but I didn't know how." "You're right about one thing," I said calmly. "If you'd confessed, I wouldn't have taken it well. Maybe keeping it secret even made it more exciting for you." She winced at that, then straightened. "I can see how much this hurt you, Dan, and I understand why you feel betrayed. But don't you think divorce is taking it too far?" "No," I said without hesitation. "Not this time. You chose to give yourself to other people. For me, that crosses a line I can't come back from. That's why I'm ending this." Melissa's shoulders slumped, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. "Can we at least stop and think about what this means?" she pleaded softly. "For us? For everyone else? Before we just throw it all away?" "I've already thought about it," I replied. "Take whatever time you need, but I doubt my answer will change." Next chapter. I left her to wrestle with her thoughts and walked down to the Fox and Hounds for a pint. I've always liked pubs, but that one never felt right to me. After all our years in the neighborhood, I realized I wouldn't miss it when I left. The place was usually full of self-important middle-aged loudmouths, and if I had my way, a proper Yorkshire ale would beat the thin southern brews they served there any day. I sat nursing my pint, flat, lukewarm, nearly flavorless, turning over what I should do next. By the time I got home, Melissa was upstairs dressing for dinner. I climbed to the guest room, tossed my bag onto the bed, and collected a few essentials from the master bedroom. Dinner conversation stayed mostly focused on the girls. Lily, apparently following her mother's advice, had been dating casually, still bruised from her last breakup. Not surprising, considering her ex was now with her best friend. I'd asked Melissa what BFF meant, and she'd explained it stood for Best Friend Forever. Somehow, I doubted that friendship would survive. For years, I'd thought of Melissa as my own best friend. She sensed I was pulling away. She could feel the coldness in me. But I don't think she understood just how much had changed. Maybe because I kept things polite, civil, never cruel, never openly unkind, just distant. She seemed convinced that the conversation we'd had earlier that afternoon had settled things somehow, an unspoken agreement, almost like a truce. I didn't bother correcting her, not yet anyway. By Sunday morning, before the first light of dawn, I was awake. I brewed a quick cup of coffee, buttered some toast, packed my bags, and slipped behind the wheel of the Weebug. Everything that belonged to Melissa had already been cleared out of the car. Business folders, loose papers, every trace of her, carefully removed before I left. With the boot packed, I pointed the car north toward Yorkshire. I had just passed Watford when my phone buzzed in the passenger seat. "Where are you?" Melissa's voice burst through the line, sharp and startled. "Did you take the Weebug to the garage or something?" she pressed, almost accusingly. "No," I said evenly. "I'm driving it. I'm heading to Yorkshire." Silence. A beat of confusion. "You've already left?" she asked, her tone tightening. "Why would you just take the Weebug and not even say goodbye?" "You were still asleep," I said simply. "I didn't want to wake you." There was another pause, heavier this time. "I don't understand," she muttered at last, frustration creeping into her voice. "What am I supposed to do without the Weebug?" "You can take the other car," I suggested. "The one I usually drive." Her sigh on the other end was sharp with irritation. "I still don't get why you had to take my car," she said bitterly. "But I know you're not thinking clearly right now, so I'll let it go. I'll make do with the other one. Just, please, be careful. Don't wreck it." By Monday afternoon, the Weebug was gone. In its place sat a bright red Mazda MX-5 convertible I'd spotted on a Yorkshire lot. I traded the Weebug in on the spot, kept the personalized plates, sorted the paperwork with the DVLA, and later listed the plates online. When Melissa called later that week and realized I wasn't coming back to Surrey anytime soon, she erupted. "How am I supposed to get my car back?" she demanded. "You can't," I said flatly. "I sold it." "What do you mean you sold it?" she shrieked down the line. "It was never really yours," I replied, calm and unshaken. "I bought it. The registration's always been in my name." "That's not fair, Dan," she shot back. "Maybe not," I admitted. "You could say it was a gift, that taking it back is unfair. But Melissa, doesn't that sound almost exactly like what you did to me?" "Oh, don't start," she scoffed. "That's completely different. You're just being spiteful. But fine, I get the point you're trying to make. If you'd just stop this nonsense and come home, we could actually sit down, talk it through, and figure things out." "Leave it to me," I said quietly. "I'll come back when I'm ready." She didn't give up. For the next week, she called every single day, pleading with me to return, to talk things over, to fix what was left. Every conversation circled the same arguments, until the day she learned I had sold my stake in ABC. "How could you do that without telling me?" she screamed. "I'm a shareholder too." "You're right," I said evenly. "You've got the second largest stake. And yeah, what I did affects you directly. I understand why you're angry, but I didn't need your permission to sell, and I already knew you'd never agree to it. Now maybe you know how I felt when you decided to have your fun behind my back. I'm sorry you're upset, but the deal's done. You'll have to adjust." "You're unbelievable," she hissed. A few days later, she called again. This time her rage had gone beyond words, screaming so loud I could barely make out what she was saying. Back when we'd founded ABC, our shares were split evenly. What Melissa never knew, though, was that after my father passed away, I inherited his stake, giving me controlling interest, 51%. When the new majority owners froze the company accounts and scheduled an emergency general meeting to replace the board and complete the takeover, she was blindsided. "You don't understand, Dan," she yelled into the phone. "ABC had over $200,000 in the bank. Because of what you've done, I can't access any of it. That was supposed to be our retirement fund. What the hell am I supposed to do now?" I let her words hang for a moment before answering quietly. "I'm sorry, Melissa," I said softly. "I truly am, but at least you still have your job." "I assumed you were still holding that position." A sharp breath, laced with irritation, cut through the silence between us. "Oh God," she muttered. Her reaction, wide-eyed and shocked, told me my words had struck harder than I'd expected. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then came the soft, muffled sound of her crying, restrained but raw. Without speaking, she turned her back to me and walked away. Over time, I'm fairly certain Melissa pieced together the truth of my arrangement with Jack Spencer, particularly how ABC's resources and assets were folded into the deal. What she never uncovered, though, was that in exchange for 51% of the company's shares, I negotiated a payout equal to twice the average annual revenue from the previous 5 fiscal years, along with an equivalent amount in liquid reserves. There was another clause, too. Jack agreed to retain Melissa as the company's lead consultant for no less than 2 years, providing her with a fixed annual salary plus performance-based bonuses. Jack wasn't much of a talker. He had little patience for idle chatter, but he recognized the value of Melissa's public image. Keeping her as the face of ABC simply made sense for the business. The next chapter. When divorce proceedings began, the first step was to put the house up for sale. Property transactions in England are famously convoluted. Every potential buyer seems tied to someone else's deal, forming long chains where a single delay ripples through multiple sales. To complicate matters further, even after the official deadline for offers passes, another buyer can still swoop in with a higher bid, derailing everything. That's exactly what happened to us. Initially, the best offer we received depended on several other deals closing. It would likely have gone through eventually, but the day after the deadline expired, the estate agent presented us with a slightly better proposal. Higher price, no chain, no complications. Naturally, I felt relieved when we accepted the unconditional bid. I think Melissa did too. By then, she had finally accepted that we were moving forward separately. When the sale was finalized, the new deed listed Max Payne Associates as the buyer. I had deliberately kept the true purchaser, myself, anonymous. It was a sound investment in my view. Prime location, excellent rental potential. For someone like me, a change management consultant based in Yorkshire, it was the perfect asset to hold quietly in the background. We hadn't spoken in ages when Melissa suddenly called me. She wanted to know if I had come across her wedding gown. Our daughter Laura was preparing to marry her fiancé, and Melissa hoped Laura might wear the dress. She suspected it might have ended up with my belongings during the separation. "I'm sorry, Melissa," I told her sincerely. "I don't know where it is." That was true, though not the whole story. I genuinely didn't know its current whereabouts because, some time ago, I had sold it to a kind woman who owned a second-hand boutique in Yorkshire. I had no intention of letting Melissa keep that dress. After everything, the vows she'd broken, the damage done, the thought of one of my daughters walking down the aisle wearing it was intolerable. A few days later, Lily called me in a flurry. "Dad, Mom's completely freaking out," she cried, teetering on the edge of melodrama. "She just found out the diamond and eternity ring you gave her years ago is fake, cheap costume jewelry, practically worthless." "Oh dear," I replied evenly. "That's unfortunate. She must have really believed it was genuine. I imagine this is hard on her." Then, almost to myself, I added, "Life does that sometimes. We attach so much meaning to things, only to be devastated when the truth turns out to be something else entirely." What Melissa never knew was that the real ring, the genuine diamond, rested securely in a bank deposit box. Maybe one day, if I meet someone truly deserving, it will finally find the hand it was meant for.